Well, very good afternoon to everybody in who's watching this show on the lead. As we know, the leader of the Telugu Desam Party, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu, was arrested on September 9th in a surprise arrest at 6 a.m. On in Nandyal, where he was camping as part of his statewide tour, and the APCID had arrested him as accused number one in the AP skill development scam, what is now called the AP skill development scam. And of course, it's an allegation that the Telugu Desam Party, as well as various bureaucrats who have worked with Mr. Chandrababu Naidu when he was chief minister, they have contested pretty hotly. And today we are not going to talk to anybody from a political party. We're going to talk to Dr. PV Ramesh. Please excuse me, Dr. PV Ramesh. He was formerly a bureaucrat. He is now retired. He was working with the Chandrababu Naidu government, and in fact, in some, in one, some may say that a lot of what is going on right now could be attributed to what he has written in the file notings. So let's hear it directly from the horse's mouth. Thank you, Dr. Ramesh, for joining us. I know it's very difficult and almost impossible for bureaucrats to come and speak out, because most of the time they're soft targets. Various governments, state governments, central governments have attacked bureaucrats, and because they simply cannot speak out, it's against the conduct rules. But you're now retired and you are happy to speak. So would you be kind enough to tell us what actually happened? What is the truth? What are these allegations against Mr. Chandrababu Naidu? Are they true?
Very good afternoon to you. Thank you, Sandhya, for having me and giving me an opportunity to speak to you, to illustrate, to clarify some of those questions in the minds of the audience who may be watching this, and also to clarify some of those issues that seem to cloud this. And first and foremost, I was the principal finance secretary of Andhra government from January 2011 to July 2016. It's a fairly long time. And during this period, the state divided and it was bifurcated between Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Andhra Pradesh was formed on 2nd June 2014, and Mr. Chandrababu Naidu became the chief minister. Now, one of the major planks or the major drivers of the development agenda that was brought to the new state, and it's important to give you a little background because when Andhra divided, Andhra Pradesh inherited 58% of the expenditure burden, population, but had only 45% of the whole state's revenues. The state was under a fiscal strain, a state that had always had a revenue surplus, never borrowed more than 2.5% of the state gross domestic product, though 3% was provided. But suddenly we found it ballooned to 4% in the bifurcation process in the division of the assets and others. So I was also the secretary in charge of the state reorganization department. So I had knowledge, information, and also role which was bigger than that of the finance secretary. When we divided, the long discussions during Mr. Naidu's time in the initial part was Vision 2029, which was essentially in 5 years, Andhra Pradesh must become one of the three leading states in India in terms of the growth, in terms of the per capita income, and in terms of quality of life for the people. This was a challenge essentially considering Andhra Pradesh was primarily an agrarian state, and it had quite a dense population, especially in the irrigated coastal areas. And the Rayalaseema area was a low rainfall area, so not really agriculturally intense. And the large number of young people were looking for employment. So the main plank was Vision 2029 to transform Andhra Pradesh from an agrarian economy to a more modern, diversified economy, create employment. And employment did require skills. So the expectation was that the unemployed youth would be trained, plus also those who are uh, in the engineering colleges, polytechnics, and the industrial training institutes, the ITIs, would also be, their skills would be upgraded, so they would be ready for employment, and especially industry ready. In this direction, a number of steps were taken. I think this background is important for everyone to know, because a number of steps were taken, and the major steps included investment, attracting investors to Andhra Pradesh, considering it was a coastal state, a long coastline. So, over a period of 2 years, a major effort was made to strengthen the infrastructure in general. In fact, we had a major 1 billion 8,000 crore project for Vizag Chennai Industrial Corridor. We have had several during that period. Mr. Naidu led delegations to China, Japan, Korea, Singapore, to Europe, to UK. I mean, essentially, and also who held several rounds of discussions with the industry. The expectation was, and then you could see that in the form of the Kia Motors, the Isuzu Motors, the Hero Honda. So a whole host of industries had started to show interest in coming to Andhra Pradesh.
Yes, you're right. Because I remember that period. I remember, in fact, I had covered a lot of the various projects that had been announced and were being pursued by the Chandrababu Naidu government at that time,
Right,
including Amravati, of course, which sort of hogged the headlines. But I
right,
do remember, and I do know quite well that
right,
a whole lot of things were happening at the same time.
right.
It was like a flurry of activity.
That's right.
Sorry, please go on.
No, it's absolutely right. I mean, in a way, he had this vision which was bigger than life. When you could see Hyderabad, what it has become. And so it was very similarly very grand, very mega, and very big effort. And it was in this direction. It was also around the same time that the National Skill Development Corporation, Skill Development Mission, which had already been launched, but it was really expanded in the new government of Mr. Modi. And so the first effort was made was to establish a skill development corporation. If I remember right, it was sometime in to 2014 September or October, and the it was supposed to be a public-private partnership. I mean, state government would chip in, then the National Skill Development Corporation would come in, and then private sector. And they, if I also remember right, the GM Rao of the GMR was appointed as the chairman of this corporation, and or the chairman of the advisory council, one of the two. So it had quite a few leading entrepreneurs of India, not just Andhra Pradesh, advising this corporation. Later, it was converted into a full-fledged department. And because this was originally under the higher education department, the expectation was you really need a full-fledged department of its own, and a department for entrepreneurship, innovation, and skill development. And that was the main mandate of the department was established. So people have been saying that these were set up without the cabinet approval and all that. But I think that cannot be the reality. All these major decisions were always approved by the cabinet after going through a due process. Now, thereafter, in 2015-2016 fiscal year budget, an allocation of 370 crores was made for this corporation, for this department to promote skills, innovation, entrepreneurship. So it was supposed to be a very comprehensive type of an enterprise. Now, this budget was voted by the legislature. It was appropriated, which is a normal legal process. I mean, by which funds get allotted to a department. The role of the finance department is quite critical, uh, in the sense that one has to manage the resources and the expenditure. Now, meanwhile, to step back a little bit from the finance department's functioning, the issue right now under which Mr. Chandrababu Naidu has been detained by the police relates to the specific project, because there were several projects I mean, it's also, people seem to think that there was a skill development scam. I mean, if at all, it was the skill development scheme. It contained a number of projects, number of programs, including a project of the World Bank for modernization of the ITIs, the Industrial Training Institution. So it was not, and then there were other skill development centers that were going on. There was a proposal for Siemens India. Now, Siemens at that time had come up with a proposal saying they had a CSR and they would set up the skill development cluster. So, this was a hub and spoke model. There would be one center of excellence and there would be six centers, and these would be located in the big engineering colleges and the polytechnic colleges. And so, there would be six such clusters, basically, six such hubs and spokes. And each was to have an outlay of about 500 and odd crores, and the state was to contribute 10%, and the rest was to come from the Siemens from its CSR. And the expectation was that they would this would come in the form of a hardware and software that would be installed in these institutions, and the state would contribute the 10%. So that was what the fact of the matter was. And then we were given uh, this was a proposal that had come. That proposal was very carefully examined, and thereafter we had sent a team of very senior officials. There was the secretary of the Skill Development Corporation, Skill Development Department, the secretary of finance. Finance department, incidentally, has 4 or 5 secretaries, being a large department, and then they went to Gujarat. They studied what was going on, what went on there when the Prime Minister Modi was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, and they came back with a very strongly positive report. And this report was submitted, was discussed with the Chief Minister. A presentation was made to the Cabinet of Ministers, to the Council of Ministers. So, in that sense, that it was quite discussed extensively, and finally, this particular project with an outlay of whatever 370 crores or so, the total outlay of 3,000 plus crores, 10% was to be the state's contribution, was approved by the cabinet and the chief
So,
secretary.
just to get the chronology right, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There is an AP skill development truth.com. It's a website that's been put up by the Telugu Desam party. This has happened recently post Mr. Naidu's arrest. And in that, there's a chronology of events that has been put up. And they say that in December 2014, this team that Dr. Ramesh is speaking about, they had visited Gujarat and conducted a detailed study about the centers and submitted a report. And by mid-February, or rather, yeah, around mid-February, the Council of Ministers had, approved in principle, the establishment of these six clusters that Dr. Ramesh is speaking about. So there are about 2.5 months had in fact gone by since the team of bureaucrats had visited Gujarat and submitted a report, and the approval had been given by the Council of Ministers. Sorry, Dr. Ramesh, please go on.
No, I think it's important to clarify the chronology. And so this was approved by the Cabinet of Ministers. An order was issued approving the scheme. Later, the budget was provided by the legislature. So the process normally, Sandhya, is that once the budget is approved and appropriated by the legislature, the department has a right to operate that budget as per the approved scheme of programs and projects and schemes without really being encumbered by any other considerations. However, any change in the scheme, in the nature, in the content, in the substance, or the financing part of it, has to have the approval of the finance department. And if required, it also goes up. If it's a large number, it goes up to the chief minister or even to the council of ministers, as the case may be. There are very clear rules of business for conducting this secretariat uh, departmental process. So it's not an ad hoc process, at least during the period that I was in the Andhra Pradesh government, that was under December 2016. Later, I went to Government of India, and I returned back again, incidentally, in 2019 June to work with the current Chief Minister. So let me clarify that. So there is a very clear process by which the finance department is involved. Now, files come from different sources. There are 25 ministers, 58 secretaries, and 227 commissioners in the government of Andhra Pradesh. And then files come from all of them, and we maintain a parallel shadow file. I mean, this is a practice in few states where the finance department, and I'm told similar procedure is followed by the Prime Minister's office, because they receive files from multiple departments, and to have a continuity. And within the finance department, there is a large staff, and they pour over every single minute detail, or at least that used to be the case when I was the secretary. And I used to encourage my colleagues and my staff to be openly discuss things, because we are custodians of the public trust, and this is a public money, this is not a private money, and it's not anybody's pocket money. So we used to ensure that all angles are very, very carefully examined. Now, what happens is, in government and also in some of the states which have adequate revenues, once the budget is allotted, the finance department comes in only if there is a change in the nature of the expenditure or additional expenditure is required. But in states like Andhra Pradesh, where the resources are really very fragile between the revenues and the demands for expenditure, so virtually every single expenditure is again scrutinized by the finance department, and that is the
And
reason why. Yes.
sorry, just a clarification. Since you're saying that this happens in Andhra Pradesh, is it because Andhra Pradesh had just been carved out and it was, like you said, a smaller state and revenues were not enough compared to the expenditure? Is that the reason why this happened, or
That's
is this like part of the course?
I think it happens in all the states. It
Okay,
actually happens across the country because it's essentially to ensure a greater due diligence and oversight by a third party. So, finance department being an independent entity within the center of the government, it
right.
usually scrutinizes these things a bit more
Okay,
closely.
understood.
So this project, which was approved by the cabinet, scheme which was cleared by the cabinet, the financing which was approved by the legislature, was once again looked at in the finance department. Essentially, when the release was requested for, when the department said that we need to release this 370 crores to Siemens. So we have had a series of, my memory serves me right, we had series of conversations and discussions, roundtables at several times, and finally felt that this was the project to move forwards. This was something that was required, and we put safeguards in place. We released this money not to the agency but to the Department of Skill Development, number one. It was transferred to what is called as a PD account, which is a public deposit account maintained by the departments and the corporations, which is more of a virtual account because the money remains with the treasury and is drawn by the concerned secretary or the authorized officer as per the rules. And we release that money with the safeguards to set up a matrix for monitoring, a system for close diligence, release of funds based on the actual performance. So a number of safeguards were carefully kept in place, and the department had subsequently issued orders based on those safeguards. So in this whole business, let us look at what happened within the government. Were there violations of rules, regulations, procedures, or was there an appropriation or misappropriation or misuse of the money? Now, from the narrative that I have outlined earlier, I have absolutely no reason to believe at any stage there was any deviation from the established procedure of the government. There was no absolutely no trace of any malfeasance of any nature, because this was not once, it was multiple times by multiple people at multiple levels, scrutinized, reviewed, and approved, and all this for the larger interests of skilling the people. Now, I'm told subsequently, I left, of course, the state government service and went to center in December 2016. But I've been told lakhs of people were trained, the centers were established, there was a hardware, software installed, and people benefited from the overall investment that was made in this entire scheme. So I am not sure as to what the criminal investigation department is talking about. Two, three things disturb me. One is they recorded my statements. They recorded my statements thrice under the and also I gave 264 statement before the magistrate under both. Now I have outlined the same what I am telling you, what the CID had told me during their conversation with me, or during their investigation, and when they asked me questions and interrogated me, if I may use the term, quite honorably and quite respectfully. Uh, they informed me that there no files are available other than the file of the finance department. Now, I think if I were heading the criminal investigation department, the first thing I would do is to fix responsibility to how those files have gone missing from the skill development department and skill development corporation. Where did they go? Who took them away? What happened to them? Who destroyed them? Who was responsible?
So, so this APCID is saying that any files relating to this project from the Skill Development Corporation has gone missing.
Correct. That's what they tell me.
Okay.
So they have pinned all the entire case on the shadow file of the finance department. The shadow file of the finance department, by its very nature, has no legal sanctity. It is like a scrapbook that is maintained. And my practice had been, which is not usually the practice of senior IAS officers, is to record a very detailed note in my own hand or type out the note myself. And that is a habit I have acquired from my 13 years work with the multilateral development agencies, the World Bank, the United Nations, where what you write is what is the gospel. So maybe, except for the finance department file, the CID told me that they had no other document. Number one, where did they go? So that if I were heading this department, this is what I would do first. Second, the entire transaction within the government is as per the rules, regulations established by law. There is nothing unconstitutional, nothing illegal, nothing that can be remotely construed as improper. Improper, morally, ethically, even other procedurally. Now, fourth is, after the money has been released to this executing agency, I think it's called the Design Tech,
Yes.
which the Siemens had said is there. It is a company set up essentially to channel the CSR funding, and they received funds from multiple sources, not just from Andhra Pradesh government, but from multiple sources, because they had multiple projects ongoing at any given time. And so, second is, if that is the case, the money was released by the state government through a check or through an RTGS transfer, and same goal holds for the company. Company has to transfer the money either through a legal process, or if it is drawing out cash, then somebody has drawn that cash. And where did that cash go? I think fundamentally these are issues that I'm not sure have been addressed even remotely, either directly or indirectly. They have been told there are several shell companies that have been set up by this company, quite possibly so. In which case, then again, the concerned officials who are investigating this case ought to have gone after those companies, traced out those directors, looked at their procedures, establish the trail of money. Where did it go? Did it land in the hands of Ramesh or Mr. Naidu or who? These are serious matters. I mean, this is the officials, whether the IPS, IAS, and the whole bureaucracy uh, work, exists to function within the framework of rule of law, the and the overall umbrella of the constitution. So this cannot be a tool of a political witch hunt or a political agenda.
Right. Now, my question to you, Mr. Ramesh, Dr. Ramesh, is that, if now we have Siemens, we have Design Tech. Design Tech is, of course, the entity that is putting everything together, right? Bringing all the stakeholders together, like Siemens and the government of Andhra Pradesh, bringing all of the colleges, the educational institutions, all of them together, right? So the payment would have obviously gone from the government of Andhra Pradesh to Design Tech, if I'm not mistaken, because
The money was transferred to the Department of Skill Development,
okay,
and
and from there,
that in turn was kept in the public deposit account of the Skill Development Corporation. And Skill
okay,
Development Corporation had released this money over a period in different installments or tranches over a period of 4 to 5 months to Design Tech. So I'm sure the officials who are at helm of affairs at that time in the skill development department ought to be answering these questions and ought to be held accountable if money went missing.
right. You're absolutely right. Now, the second question, I mean, this is another issue that has been mentioned by by various people, representatives of the ruling party, and they has basically stated that no, I mean, the money was given out, the money was paid, but no work was actually done in the in the sense of there were no training centers set up. Now, is that something you are aware of? Would you know whether these training centers were set up, were people trained, or was it all just this big sham thing that happened?
No, I'm not sure that's possible given what I know. I mean, I certainly was not I don't have a direct information or knowledge because I left the state government in 2016 December, and I returned back, of course, in 2019. Now, let me say this very clearly. What I talked to the officials who are responsible, and in fact, I was in the chief minister's office. I was special chief secretary to the current chief minister for a year and a half. And during this period, I was also in charge of these departments of higher education, skill development. And the officials used to meet me quite frequently. And they had, number one, never complained at all. Number two, because I specially asked them if what happened with that money, because 4 years earlier, I was handling this 3 years earlier. And they told me that lakhs of people had been trained, they were established, they very much machinery was there, and things were done perfectly fine. I mean, or at least this is what I've been told. So as long as I was there, I left in October 2020. I left the government in October 2020. Till such time, I had absolutely not a whisper from any source, directly or indirectly, saying that something had gone wrong in this department. And in fact, there were the schemes continuing. Many new schemes were launched earlier. I'm not sure how this surfaced in 2021.
That's yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, it's quite interesting because even the Telugu Desam party says that one Mr. Arja Shrikant, who is an IAS officer, senior IAS officer, who's now in charge of, or rather in 2021, I believe he was in charge of the AP Skill Development Corporation, and he had issued a letter as well, commending Design Tech for implementing this project really well. So so strange. I mean, that's one of the issues that has been brought up by the representatives of the ruling party. Well, we're going to have to wait and see what happens, what the CID makes of this. My next question to you is: the cost of this project too high? Because this is something that people have been criticizing, that the project cost is too high, and that it was absolutely not justified considering the end result of the whole thing. Now, did you get this evaluated by a third party, the cost of the project, etc., when you were setting this up?
Yeah, I mean, let me put it this way. There was a precedent from other states, especially from Gujarat. This was based also to an extent on that model, the Gujarat, so-called Gujarat model of skill development. The second was the Central Tool Design Institute for Central Tool Design was
I think it's
engaged
called the Central Institute of Tool Design. Yes.
Central Institute of Tool Design. This was engaged. This is a central institution. This was given the mandate to do a third-party evaluation of the cost. The third was we were looking at how many people would be trained and the per capita expenditure that would, I mean, if I am spending 3,000 crores, would I be training 3,000 people or would I be training 3 lakh people in every year? And that's, you annualize that over 10 years, you end up training nearly 3 crore people, 30 lakh people. So that is the way that this was amortized. And then considering that the partner was an internationally reputed company, and they were supplying the machinery and the equipment. So it was felt after a series of discussions, analysis, that this was an appropriate expenditure.
Okay, so the third party, which is a central government institute, they felt that this was an appropriate expenditure. Um,
We felt, I mean,
that's
based
oh,
on their
you
input, based on
based
their
on their
input,
inputs, you
based
felt it
on
was
the
fair enough.
inputs from that. And let me just step back. I mean, you mentioned Mr. Srikanth. I mean, Srikanth is a former IRTS officer, very well respected, very competent gentleman. And he was the Skill Development Corporation Managing Director when I was with the government in 2019, 2020. I suppose he continued thereafter. And he always had an appreciative word about this particular program, and apart from various other skill development, because I mean, it's as if, I mean, it sounds so scary when people talk about skill development scam. Now, this was a huge skill development scheme for the people. I think it is very unfair to characterize this as a scam of any nature.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting. You just changed one word, and the whole thing sounds positive. It's from scam to scheme, right? But anyway, or rather, the reverse has probably happened. From scheme, it's turned into a scam at the moment. My last question to you, and this is something that's pretty important because you were in the know about all of this from day one. Why were tenders not floated, invited for this? Why did the government of the day award it to Siemens in Design Tech?
I think that is a good question. This was not a project that was to be executed through a contract mode. It was not the contractors that we were being looking. I mean, you're not contracting in services. We basically, the Siemens is offering to give 90%, which was 2,700 crores for setting up skill development centers. So this offer came from the Siemens India, their CSR financing. So we were merely contributing 10%, and there was no similar offer from anyone. And I'm sure nobody would be willing to put up a 3,000 crore project and give 90% as skill development. And this very senior advisory council, and as I mentioned, I mean, one I remember certainly was Mr. GM Rao, who actually was advising and guiding, and there were quite a few other senior entrepreneurs. And in fact, the whole anxiety and ambition those days was to ensure that the youngsters of Andhra Pradesh, who basically were had no choice but to migrate out of Andhra Pradesh, and they leaving no workforce that was skilled within Andhra Pradesh, with the industry, with the services expanding. So the expectation was that the youngsters, the youth, the young boys and girls would be trained and would be industry ready within this short period of time. I mean, the ambition was really Vision 2029, make it the third biggest economy among the 29 states in Andhra Pradesh, in India. So, how do you drive the growth? How do you ensure there's the employment generated for people? So, there were many, many things that come together at that time, and I'm really shocked to see this has taken such a noxious turn. In fact, very sad.
So, do you think things like this, like you said, I mean, I'm quoting you on this. You said it's a noxious turn that this has taken. Um, do such things have a chilling effect on the bureaucrats, on the bureaucracy, or even perhaps on the IPS? Because, does anybody really want to, after this, do they really want to attempt something big, ambitious, attempt a bigger scheme that is not been done before? Does this have a chilling effect?
I mean, let me put it this way. I think this what has happened uh, is unfortunate and is unprecedented, perhaps. Uh, if there is a malfeasance, if there is a misappropriation, if there was a mismanagement, or if there is a gross deviation from the established procedures, the officials have to be held responsible. And of it, because each one there is a certain delegation that exists across the board. It is not that the chief minister does everything. Chief ministers set the tone, set the policy, the vision, the strategy, and the big picture, and then of course they monitor how things going on. And Mr. Naidu was one such who was very very closely monitoring everything that was going on, and he worked very hard indeed. Now, so this certainly, if this happens, and the officials are held accountable, the political leadership is held accountable, then we would be ending up with an utter chaos in the system. And I would not be surprised that now nobody would write anything on the files. Nobody perhaps would do without a clear written instructions from the highest level. And this would lead to a complete paralysis of the development process anywhere, not just in Andhra Pradesh. Second is the way at least what I notice about the criminal investigation process is also leaves much to be desired. There need to be a greater professionalization. There has to be objectivity, and there has to be a certain strategic uh, path by which you unravel if there is indeed a scam. I mean, by all means. I mean, if there could be scams. I mean, we've seen a
Well,
few of
yes, I mean, if that's their
them.
job to
Yeah, that's
hold
right.
people
Exactly. I
accountable if
mean,
there's a scam.
yeah,
Yes.
I mean, this department exists essentially to excavate the truth, and the truth is absolute. I mean, it cannot be that it's the truth of Ramesh or truth of somebody else. I mean, the truth is truth. It's based on facts, evidence, record. So I wish that there is a. I mean, this would have a very negative impact on the morale and much more importantly on the sense of commitment of the officials for the development process, because development is an ambitious process, is an escalator, is you need to really be think out of the box. You got to be innovative. You got to improvise on what exists. And sometimes, I mean, some of these things, we see this with the startups all the time. 1% of the startups succeed, whereas this is much more concrete. Now, if these are characterized as scams, I think there would be serious setback to people who are willing to stick their neck out, to speak up, to write up, to do something which is not uh, not told by their masters. So this will kill the bureaucratic initiative.
Okay. So it's um, it's a very interesting issue. In fact, I mean, apart from the fact that there are a number of people already behind bars, and of course, the investigation is going to have to come to the right conclusion, the truthful conclusion. There are many, people who are calling this an act of political vendetta, and the courts are going to hear this as well. And Mr. Naidu's team has also already moved for bail, so we should be in a position to find out what happens next, as in the coming week or so. Dr. Ramesh, thank you very very much for joining us, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And thank you for coming out so boldly and speaking out about this, because most bureaucrats, whether they are in service or retired, they would not do this. So thank you very much. It's really appreciated.
Thank you very much. I mean, just a last word. I mean,
Sure.
I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure you try to. I think let also the government representatives speak with you and give their version. It's what I'm saying is based on what I know and what the my record that I am familiar with knows. Maybe there is something more. Then that must be revealed. And this sort of a jugglery does not work. It really has a very devastating negative impact on not just the morale of the people concerned, but much more importantly on the development of the state. And
Yes,
the state really deserves far better.
far better. And on that note, thank you very much, and we'll track the developments here on the late.
Thank you, ma'am. All right.